Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
Hey Wayne, so I thought the first time we'd have you on the pod as co-host, we might actually have some football to talk about, but it doesn't seem to be the case. We've got COVID to talk about. It seems to be all we've talked about for the last 2 years. So how are you anyway?
I'm great. I'm non-impacted by COVID, non-directly anyway. The gods conspired against me. They knew what was happening. They knew I was set up to co-host for the first time on your wonderful podcast, stepping into the considerable shoes of Paul, and then this happened, and United haven't even played for me to moan about. It's unbelievable.
Well, I'm sure there's something we can find to moan about. Anyway, I'm sure everyone knows you, but perhaps tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself, and then we won't have to do that again.
Yeah, okay. I'm 40.
40?
Yeah, that's terrible. I was afflicted by the big 4-0 earlier this year, and that's the most interesting thing about me is my age, as I keep rambling on. I think what happened is when I turned 40, I decided that was all I was ever going to talk about,
right,
in order to sort of mentally prepare myself for the next decade. So I've been doing that, saying I'm 40 a lot. But yeah, other people might know me, other than being 40, as a writer on United. Ed, we go way back, and I feel sometimes I feel like a little bit of a fraud when I say that I'm a writer. Because when we started knowing each other, I should say, I was doing podcasts, I was, writing everywhere on any website that would have me about United. And it just sort of developed into writing books, which has been a very fortunate career to make. So, I guess that's how I would describe myself: a writer, a biographer, a ghostwriter. I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of former United people over the years in a variety of different kind of avenues, really, because I love talking to players and stuff like that. But you talk to the coaches, you talk to the physios and different managers and stuff, and you get a completely different perspective of what the club's about, really. And having done that for the last decade, and you and I, obviously, everyone who listens to this, hopefully, are lifelong United fans, and we all have this insatiable love for the club. So being able to sort of understand it from the perspective of those who were looking after the football side of it, and not just the players, because obviously the players have got their egos and their contributions, and even the ones who didn't win titles have got their egos and their contributions. So to talk to those people who were responsible for how the football's meant to run and how, they felt Manchester United identity is supposed to be on the pitch, that's been one of the most enjoyable aspects of the sort of last decade for me. So yeah, people know that I've got bore on about that a lot. I do like to talk about that because I think it's so fascinating, and I don't think a lot of people do. When he got married with the Ferguson era, a lot of people would talk about it being, and they're right, it was a victory of mental strength a lot of times under Ferguson, but people would sort of disregard the tactical aspects of it or the holistic approach. You just say 4-4-2, bombastic United, but I always feel it's a little bit more compelling than that, a little bit more in depth. So, yeah, I've been known to babble on about that, and not quite as humanly positive as Paul, I must admit, but I do try and be more positive towards United.
You're not the kind of biographer who looks for dead on people. I'm just trying to think of an example. Your recent one on the Sunshine Boys on the De Silva brothers is very upbeat about the players and their careers, and I think it kind of comes across how much you enjoy doing that and digging into not always the most famous players, and it's kind of always unique insight, I think.
Yeah, sorry, even with the more famous ones like Beckham and Best, I always like to it's going to be about a mix of different things where they're obviously known as much for the celebrity as for the football. And the stupid thing is that I say stupid because I think it's such a basic approach, is when I set out to write those books, the premise was just write about the football. And it didn't seem wildly controversial at the time. Do you know what I mean? But I'm looking back and thinking, well, maybe it was. But yeah, that ties into the sort of positive aspect, the endlessly positive aspects of romanticising United, because you don't always romanticize Beckham and Best because of the way that their exits happened, really. And so I think that's probably what people expect from me, a certain amount of romanticisation, although I do try and be objective as well, Ed, and I shall try my level best to be objective.
I always need a good counterbalance because I can't help but go to the worst possible doom scenario about United. It's not quite as bad as my feelings about the cricket. I grew up watching cricket or listening to cricket, and England got battered all of the time, which is happening again right now. And Paul will know this, but whenever for many years recently, England have had the best one-day side on the planet, and by some distance. But I'm always my mental state is always prepared for doom, and and I sometimes feel like that about United, and it's more justified. Anyway, I mean, is it a doom scenario at Old Trafford right now? I mean, apparently 19 players and staff have been tested positive. Obviously, none of them actually named for sort of medical confidentiality reasons, although I reckon we'll work it out at some point, depending on who's back and who's not. Shut the training ground down. The under-18s game was called off, as well as the first team games against Brighton and Brentford. It's kind of worrying times, isn't it?
It is, on the aspects of the human condition. And, first of all, hope that everyone's all right and isn't too badly affected by it. And the residual impact, because we still don't know everything about this illness, we know that it can have long-term impacts. So even for athletes,
so Dean Henderson was one,
So you hope that. I mean, I don't sound, again, this may well be the optimistic in me coming out here, but I don't think it was a bad time for these games to be postponed. A little bit like in Rocky IV when Apollo fights Ivan Drago at the start.
Right.
And Rocky says you should postpone it to learn a little bit more about him. I feel like that's a bit of a godsend for us at the moment, because if we'd have played Brentford after how we played against Norwich, and if we'd have put in a similar performance, I think they would have embarrassed us, quite frankly. So it's a bit longer how many players at the moment can train, we don't know, but it's a little bit longer to get used to the new manager's methods. His new methods under the coaches that he's got in there. The pandemic side of it is obviously dreadful, because you look at it from the human perspective, and we don't know how long those repercussions are going to last, and how hastily everything's been sort of done because how erratic the national response has been to this as well. And it has been dreadfully erratic. People don't know what they're doing from one day to the next. I mean,
I was amazed actually. I was back in the UK. I mean, listeners know I live in the US now. That's a whole different story, the US. But I was back in the UK in late August, I think it was. And it was as if the country decided that COVID didn't exist anymore. I was a bit shocked, because where I live in Seattle, everyone's ultra cautious all of the time.
When a couple of weeks ago, when they announced masks were compulsory again, we went to the local supermarket and we took our masks, and no one else had masks on. And I'm like, did you miss the word compulsory? Oh, maybe it wasn't compulsory, but it was words to the effect of, you've got to go out and wear your mask now.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And I wonder if, maybe football's not exempt from this, that there's just been this casual approach to it, a more casual approach as this new variant has come in. And maybe it has been part of football as well, that, obviously a couple of weeks ago, there were only a couple of cases in the country, and then all of a sudden it's this variant that's grinding the country to a halt. And I don't know if this is right, Ed, and maybe I should have been more prepared for this, but wasn't there the case where they were releasing the figures on the Premier League monthly testing, and didn't they miss one? And we didn't know how many were tested for a certain period of time.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, now there seems to be a massive jump in cases, and I wonder if if there was something missed in there that they weren't able to track the growth. But obviously internally, the clubs have got to be aware of these kind of things.
Yeah, they've gone down to once a week testing, I think, and now they've gone back up to 3 times a week with the emergency protocols, and they may even go up to daily again, I believe. I mean, and that will bump the numbers up just because they'll be catching more cases than they used to. But also, it's clear that I'm no epidemiologist, but it seems clear that this is wildly transmissible, this variant, and this is why people are getting it. And that did give me pause for thought with United. What is it? Is it the players are following the kind of national mood and they're out and about and they're just catching it in their daily lives? Because, players like to go out, and even if they're not drinkers these days, they attend bars and restaurants and functions and commercial stuff. And so is it that they weren't taking precautions, or are they vaxxed? Because actually, like a few months ago, United were one of the lower percentage clubs in terms of being vaxxed. Or is it just bad luck? This variant is catching people who are vaxxed at a much higher rate than before. And that would be the worrying scenario for the football generally, because of its high profile. There will be pressure on football to kind of shut down if the case rate keeps jumping like this. Even if it's just following the national trends.
I do think that in the next couple of weeks, maybe it'd be a sensible thing to just put a block on fixtures for a couple of weeks and just rearrange them at some point, because, to try and sort this while it's gone a little bit out of control, to sort of put a reset on it. I don't think there's anything too wild about that. I mean, a lot of people would start crying about it and sort of saying it's a bad response, but you're quite right. In terms of, there seems to be a bit of a reaction anyway. Since these games started postponing, clubs seem to be briefing a lot more about more testing, don't they? And a lot of clubs are trying to put out the figures like, we're actually moving to 100% testing and everything like that, and 100% vaccine, sorry. So it's good to see that there's some kind of response, but you can't flick a switch overnight and make that happen. And obviously there's a massive complication about forcing people to have vaccines and stuff like that.
It's a big debate everywhere, isn't it? Vaccine passports or mandates on vaccines. I mean, it's very common in schools. I had to have 6 or 7 different vaccines just to move. So, I mean, we accept it. This is super controversial because, of course, I think there's, my understanding of football is that many of them are concerned. They're worried about its potential impact on their bodies, and they just don't want that change, even if probably the risk of getting COVID in the longer term impacts is bigger than the risk of any impact from the vaccine. But there's been a reluctance on that side of things. And then we've kind of seen the other side of things this week with Klopp saying he wouldn't sign anyone who wasn't vaxxed. And I wonder whether, and there was an anonymous EFL chairman quoted in a piece in The Athletic, I think, saying something to a similar effect. And you can kind of understand why clubs and managers might start thinking like that, because it's a risk.
Absolutely is. And I mean, we don't know which of our players. I know there's stories that there's 1 or 2 United players who are very resistant to that. And I don't think it's wise to speculate on that kind of thing, especially as well. Look, I've been double vaxxed and I'm waiting for the booster. Say out now to anyone listening, I'm not going to be one of these people. I never have, because it's such everything's so new with this and we're still learning to live with it, that I'm not, apart from the wild conspiracy theorists, apart from that section, which you're always going to get a section of the population like that, I still have a lot of sympathy for people who are resistant to, having a second one or a booster or the first at all, because of the lack of information that we have still.
Yes.
Even though, I'm still on board and saying that I've had 2 jabs, I'm waiting for the booster. But it's such like you said earlier, it's a massively controversial thing. And this thing about Klopp, it's all about freedom of choice at that point. If Klopp comes out and says that, then he's entitled to, because obviously he's got the needs of his football club or wherever he goes after Liverpool to think about, that he wants to instill that kind of philosophy. And that's fine, because that's what he believes in. It's a little bit of imposition on other clubs to sort of take a similar stand, and that's what I don't really like. But I mean, that's what happens whenever you get into anything remotely political, is that you have things like this that are going to be divisive. And it's fair play, because, I mean, everyone's going to have different opinions on it. As far as we're concerned at United, look, I think that they've taken every sensible precaution, and I hope that they don't come out sort of saying either way that urging people to do. I would hope that Rangnick or whoever's in charge of transfers doesn't come out and start saying things like, we're only going to buy players who have had they've had the booster or double vaxxed and everything like that, because I don't know how sensible it is to get involved in that side of it. Just sort of do what you need to do in-house to do everything to keep moving forward. And they seem to be doing that. Because of the way that I am in my sort of personal life, I would like United to be more cautious about this, be more cautious in terms of if we need to take another week off, if we need to keep some players out, do that rather than make any risks. But
it feels like the risk is not going to go away. So the break in football or in like general life, because there's some talk of some kind of breaker after Christmas. That may well be sensible in terms of cutting the spread. The risk is there, and it's not going to go away, unfortunately. And I think we're going to have to live with this as a society and football generally, and come up with some policies. And those policies are not. There's no clean way out, I think, of that. It seems like there'll be some kind of passport system for going to football. You have to show your vax card. I think you do anyway, right? From 1st of October, you had to. And
we didn't. United, right. I haven't at least. And what I will say is that the stewards at the games are so apologetic. A lot of people have a different. Obviously, we've all got different ways that we deal with this, and we have different levels of how we welcome invasion, basically. And the stewards that I've always dealt with have always been very, very apologetic. The last one was saying sorry with every piece of scan. I mean, like sorry, and I'm like, it's your job, man. Don't worry about it. But I know I can understand a lot of people find that more difficult. But I do understand. I think that they said that the next game was going to be the one that it would have been Brighton, where they would have shown the cards. And if that's what you needed, that's what I would have done.
Well, it might have to, just to keep it on. I understand that non-political things like whether you're going to get a vaccine or not get politicised quite quickly. But we've seen they have used football as a distraction repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I think the more Premier League football is seen as a risk either on the player side or on the fan side, the more likely it is the government will kind of use that. And I don't think any of us want that. We want football to be able to continue. We want it to be safe. We want people to enjoy themselves. Anytime you go to a bar here or a bar or restaurant here, you have to show your sort of digital scan thing. And this is America, right? It's freedom. You can smell the freedom when you get off the plane. And
I will say the best thing about this season, obviously it's a low bar, but the best thing by far is going back to the game and seeing people that I haven't seen for like 18 months. Honestly, it's been quite an emotional thing. To be fair, it's been a very bumpy emotional ride in terms of the results and the way the results have happened. Not just like obviously 5-0, 2-0 to Liverpool and City, but we've had the last minute winners. We've had the last minute drama against Everton and Villa. So a lot of drama is in there. The emotional return of Ronaldo, which was really a really strange day around Old Trafford. So you've had all these days that have been quite momentous. Obviously the opening day as well. So all these big events at Old Trafford that we haven't had for a long time in terms of, although we haven't had for a long time, I say that because they've all seemed to be really big every time it's happened, that it's been extra emotional as well. So. And I've loved that. I've loved the fact that I've been able to reconnect with my mates, and it's something that I definitely don't take for granted every time that I turn up to a match, and to face with the prospects of not having that again. Like you said, we want football to continue, hopefully with us able to go as well.
I don't know when I'm back in the UK next. The last time I was allowed to get back in without a quarantine, so I was like, right, yeah. So I may do that again. We'll see on how bad this Omicron variant is and what the situation is in the various countries. What else has been happening? We had Kieran McKenna and Martin Pert leave to take over at Ipswich. What do you think? What do you think McKenna's legacy is at United? I mean, the kind of club take is that he's a really well-respected coach and a really important part of the setup, but I guess not enough for Rangnick to want to keep him.
Nicky Butt was the one who recommended him to Jose, right? And this is McKenna we're talking about. So, yeah, he was recommended by Butt. Was he at Spurs beforehand? He was
a youth coach at Spurs, yeah.
So I'm going to be honest, Ed, looking at what's happened under Ollie and looking at I try and look at it positively. I try and say that we finished third and second, and that's some kind of progression. And I wonder I don't want to, you're asking me for my opinion, I don't want to edge my bets and say, only with the benefit of hindsight. But because of how weird this dynamic is with this group of players, and I'm on the fence with this group of players, considering
Yeah.
that they were coached under a flagging world-class coach in Mourinho, a desperately flagging world-class coach. And a lot of them were coached by, or a few of them were coached by Van Gaal as well, who was a desperately flagging world-class coach. I don't know how much of the responsibility falls on the players and how much of it falls on the management and coaching setup, because you have two arguments then. You either say that the players were brilliant, but they were underperforming or desperately underperforming because of how inexperienced the coaches were, or the coaches were brilliant because these players are wildly inconsistent. And I think that obviously the truth is somewhere in the middle. I don't think that even with Guardiola, and I've said this before, maybe with Klopp, because I rate Klopp as a better coach than Guardiola, I don't think you could give Guardiola any squad of players that United have had in the last 7 years and that they would have challenged for the title. I think that they might have finished second, but I don't think that he would have had, even he wouldn't have been able to motivate them to finish higher than what they did. And that's where the strange grey area comes in for the coaches, because it's like, how well did they do? And maybe we find out when we see the results of these coaches that are currently in charge, in situ, we see, well, they've done a good job or they've done a terrible job. Will that make us revise what we think of McKenna or Solskjaer? Do we then look at that and think, well, do you know what? It was actually quite an achievement to achieve that level of consistency, such that it was for that period of time.
Sure.
From the club's party line is obviously, it's going to be that he goes with well wishes and that he's highly respected. The people that I've told to in the club, I don't want to say this, and I'm certainly not going to throw anyone under the bus, but a lot of people still didn't know what McKenna brought to the table in terms of, obviously he was respected by the players, and you've got that split opinion where a lot of people would say that Carrick and McKenna were in control of tactics. And I'm not sure how true that is, because you saw, even in the short period of time after Solskjaer was sacked, the tactics were largely the same. There wasn't a massive deviation from it. As much as some people wanted to say that there were a couple of notable selections. It was, we're totally splitting hairs with that. I just think that McKenna in particular, I think that obviously we're going to see what he's made of as a manager, and that will give us a really big answer in terms of his capability.
Tough club at Ipswich. I mean, I have to say the financial problems, and I mean, they've got, I think I'm right in saying they've got fairly new ownership now, American ownership, I think it might be. So we'll see whether he lands well there. It's a hard business, football, and there's no hiding place for a coach or players. Although I do suspect there's a few players at United are quite happy to hide on the fringes of the squad, and I think we see that. Yeah. But certainly for the coaches, I mean, they will have been called out. There'll be discussions in the dressing room about them, and I'm not surprised that he's gone, McKenna. I'm probably more surprised that Phelan is still there, because it's kind of natural for both the players and the new management to want to clean house a little bit, and even if that means the set of coaches and a manager are going to effectively change 3 times, because unless Rangnick's really successful, he's going to take up this consultancy role, whatever that really means, and there'll be a new coach and a whole new set of his team goes along with it. But maybe that's just what's needed, And Paul and I had this discussion many times, what the balance between the quality of the coaching or the manager and the coaching staff is and the players, and the structure above it, because I just wonder, United are obviously trying to move to a better structure now with Murtaugh and Fletcher. I don't know whether their roles are really clear yet, especially with Fletcher sitting on the bench so much. He wasn't against Norwich, which was kind of interesting. Are United moving to a place where they can have the structure above the coaching, that they can kind of live with this change of managers, because there's a clear direction in which they're heading? And, you certainly feel that if Rangnick has has some real power, or is working closely alongside Murtaugh, after this period is over, you certainly feel like United are probably in a clear direction. Now, whether they're successful or not, I don't know, but it's a direction, isn't it? And then you can bring in a new coach, and they may have a clearer set of ideas around what the players are. And just a final point. I mean, you talked about the quality of players, and some have been under 4 managers. David De Gea's been under all of them, right?
Yeah.
Fergie, Moyes, Giggs, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer, Carrick, Rangnick. That's quite a lot for he's not that old. David De Gea.
Right.
But, if there's a clearer direction from above, there'll be clearer direction on what kind of players are needed. And that kind of, you're never going to get it right, but a real understanding of where the squad is headed and what is required to be successful.
I think with Phelan, just quickly on him, I think the reason why he's still there is, firstly, he's one link of consistency, because obviously Pert has gone. He's gone with McKenna to Ipswich. And so there's one element of stability there in Phelan. Phelan literally just signed a new 3-year contract as well.
Yeah.
Now, I know that the others signed new contracts recently as well, but Phelan's was the standout one. Now, by the way, I don't have anything against Phelan. I think that he's probably got a lot of value there that people don't realise. But one thing that I was told as well, that, and I don't know how much of this is still ongoing, that the club was still overseeing a lot of staff that they wanted to hire. They'd identified a lot over the summer, and they'd put the feelers out to get them, and that they were still waiting for a lot of staff to serve out notice periods.
Right.
So I don't know how many of those are still ongoing and how much of that Phelan was involved in. I know that he was involved in some of it, but I don't know if Solskjaer being sacked means that all of these staff who they were in the middle of recruiting, if that's been complicated somewhat, or if that was the responsibility of Fletcher. There was this number of coaches. I just don't know how many.
Yeah.
And what those notice periods were.
Murtaugh should be the consistent factor there. I mean,
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
he's a real director of football, which is unquestionable. What do you know about Chris Armas and Sasha Lenz?
Yeah, so Sasha's obviously been there for a little. He's already been there. He's been on the bench. He's been around the squad. We've seen that. And that's a very interesting one for me. I think especially we talked about the composition of this group of players, and a lot has been made about their mentalities, and certainly without wanting to name individuals, I'm sure anyone listening can name 3 or 4 at the top of their head that they want to come up with. So it'd be interesting to see what he does. I always found that the most compelling aspects of the Solskjaer reign, that you got a player who represents and he knows what it takes to represent everything to do with United, but he just couldn't pass that message on as a manager. So can a psychologist do that? Because the biggest problem that United have always had for the last 6 or 7 years is raising the game on a consistent level. It's not about necessarily matching Manchester City or Liverpool. It's about being the best that they can be. And obviously we know that the players haven't shown that. If they'd have been the best that they could be over the last 7 or 8 years, I don't think any of us would have that many excuses, or that we wouldn't have that many problems with the players. We just can see that as well as we can see that the managers have not done their job, we can see that the players have underperformed as well.
Yeah.
And
I mean, how many have performed to their best on a consistent basis of this group or the previous groups for the last 7, 8 years? Yeah, very few are completely consistent.
So Sasha, you would think, is going to come in and maybe address that. Hopefully, that's the purpose of him being there, right? He's got to try and sort of tune into the players and get them to be a ruthless set of winners. Just to diverge from the point a little bit, because well, it's not really a divergence. It's the same point. You talked earlier about players going out. Harry Maguire, as an example, he's always pictured out after a game, and for whatever reason, it doesn't really. I'm not bagging on him for that. He goes out and does it. He went out for his father's birthday, whatever. Even if it was after a defeat, he still went and did it.
They're people too.
Exactly. No, yeah, I've got no problem with that. But I was, as you know, I talked to Paul Parker weekly, and he always says that if we ever lost a game like that, in any circumstances, we wouldn't go out. And we've all heard the story about Fergie after losing 5-1 against City. He went home and cried in bed for a day. Yeah. So, and he didn't even want to read the papers the next day. So you have all that aspect. And you wonder if, and I don't want to say all modern footballers are soft, because obviously they're not. There's a massive grey area there, because modern football is much more different, and players have this profile where they've got to be seen to be present and everything like that. So that's the area. That's the key area what Sasha Lenz is going to come in and deal with. Chris Armas, you asked about. I don't know how much hands-on work he's actually done with Ralph Rangnick. I know that they were involved in the umbrella together. Yeah. The thing that I've heard a lot about him is, and people might get infuriated by this, is that he's positive like Ollie was. Yeah. And people were like rolling their eyes at all his positivity. Armas is said to carry the same kind of attitude, that he's meant to be upbeat and lifting everyone. But you look at his record's not great. And then you wonder, I'm sure Hugh, as soon as I mentioned the names Jimmy Lumsden and Steve Round, you'll have shivers down your spine as well. And I'm not saying that Chris is going to be like that. We don't know. We really don't know. But this is the uncertainty that we're talking about. And this is the I know that a change needed to happen. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. This is my only concern when you have something that was relatively stable. And I know that the form was horrible, but at least in those insular perform periods of seasons where we were having runs of form, at least we turned it around and got a decent result at the end of it. So we finished third, second, blah, blah, blah. Now, that's the only problem that you've got with making such a massive transition in the middle of the season, because you've got no guarantee of what's to follow. You didn't have no guarantee with Van Gaal and his staff. You didn't have any guarantee with Mourinho and his staff. We don't know. It's obviously you want to be excited by it. It's a massive unknown at the moment. And apart from Rangnick, who, again, I want to be positive about, but all the good things he's done have not been at a club anywhere near the size of United.
MLS is strange because of the kind of weird central contracting system anyway. So it's very hard to sustain success. And, they're like the biggest wage budget in MLS is like $28 million a year. United is 15 times bigger than that.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you a sense of the scale. And you're right with Rangnick. He's never worked at one of the big clubs. And that is a question mark, I think, for all the sort of brilliance he's had as a kind of club builder. That wasn't necessarily in coaching roles. So it's a big change. I guess you got to the point where there was no choice. Something had to give. Especially if the players had lost faith. So how long and what the kind of bump is, we'll see. I mean, they're 6 unbeaten now, and there will have been some time on the coaching like Carrington. I don't know the impact that'll have. But we've got a game coming up against Newcastle. We hope, I mean, I just watched them get completely destroyed by Manchester City. I mean, they're in desperate trouble, Newcastle, and I have to say, I mean, it won't be a surprise to anyone listening. I'd be quite happy to see them go down. Nothing against Newcastle fans, because I kind of feel some pity for Newcastle fans. They've had decades of loyally supporting their club. They're in the Gallagate, shirtless Newcastle fans, and supporting the club, and they've had an abysmal owner, just an absent father of an owner for the last, what was it, 15 years or something? I can't remember how long he'd been in charge. And now they've got something that I suppose the vast majority of Newcastle fans are very happy about.
You're absolutely right. We had that healthy respect through the 90s and the begrudging admiration that they played good football. Still felt we played, like they got this reputation as being the entertainers, and we were still playing entertaining football. It wasn't like we weren't. But then you had this, I lost all respect for them I lost a massive amount of respect for the club when they sacked Bobby Robson. I was so devastated. I've never been as devastated by a club sacking another manager as I was with the way that they treated Robson. I thought that was disgraceful. And I always felt that ever since then they had an idea above the station. Obviously, they're a massive club, don't get me wrong. I know Fergie once said they were a wee club from the northeast, and which was one of the classic Fergie lines. But I'm in the same boat as you. There are a lot of, obviously, time-served fans there, the shirtless in the Gallagher, that you want better times for. But then there's all the counter-products of this takeover, and you've seen them all come out, like welcoming the takeover and everything like that, and the reaction to it, which has been... to be fair, there are some great journalists who refuse to back down over it. Adam Crafton has been magnificent in his coverage for The Athletic. He refuses to sort of treat it with this sort of glowing admiration that everyone else seems to be doing. But for the same reasons as you, a little bit of gloss has gone off the Newcastle thing, and I really hope that, it'd be quite entertaining to see him go down. I mean, from the aspect of, they're probably still good. This is a long-term project for them, so they'll just kill the Champions League, metaphorically, next season with all the signings that they'll make. But it looks like a good time to play, and the initial shine of that takeover's gone. Eddie Howe still needs a little bit of time to get used to his players. Obviously, I think he might have even given up on this group of players, considering that he's going to be able to replace most of them in January and the summer. Do you know what I mean? So what's the point in investing too much time in this squad? And that's a pretty good situation for United to take them on, rather than take on a club like Brentford, who are playing with such high energy. Even rather than take on, you said that Brighton were quite convenient opponents, but a team who can keep the ball at Old Trafford is not a team that Manchester United want to play, because they
true.
So Newcastle, convenient. If it goes ahead, it's a really convenient game for us to play, and
it is, and they're a real disaster at the moment, and there's nothing Eddie Howe can magic up to change that around. I mean, they just ship so many goals. Minus 23 goal difference. So, and sadly, Steve Bruce has had a good coaching career, but this was a step too many. The players are mostly of Championship standard. There's a few really entertaining ones in there. Callum Wilson's a good Premier League striker. Alan St. Maximin is like one of the most fun players to watch.
Yeah,
I don't know how effective he really is, but I love watching him play.
Yeah,
and because he's just fun, but. I mean, most of the rest of the squad are bottom Premier League Championship quality players, and that's why they are where they are. I do wonder, I mean, if they do end up going down, which I think will probably be based on how many players they can get in January, and if they can, and if any other Premier League clubs will actually sell to them, because they might not, because there's a lot of anger at board chairman level, owner level, about this takeover. So we'll see whether they're able to bring the players in. And if they do go down, well, the EFL financial regulations are pretty strict, but if they only spend one season there, they'll never have to undergo the test.
Yeah.
So they can spend as much as they like to get out of it and build from there, So who knows? On the pitch, they're an absolute mess. And United will have had a good few weeks to have a look at them, and you'd think would put them away. You'd hope.
You would think.
You would think,
famous last words.
Historically, we made a prediction on this show about games, and it became something of a joke because we don't know what United is going to turn up in the current situation with games being called off all the time, and we don't even know a game is going to go ahead.
Yeah,
it's really hard to prepare or think about it. So it must be hard for the players, don't you think? I mean, they're going to be training as normal. I guess they train assuming that the game is going ahead.
Right. I mean, we don't know what they said. 7 players would have been available for the last game against Brighton. That's what they said.
Yes, and the bubbles don't help because the under-23 bubble is supposed to be a separate bubble, and they're not supposed to mix between them. So,
and we don't know the identity of any of these players, so it could end up Tom Eaton in goal. We might not have any centre backs. We might not have McTominay and Fred. They might not be available. And that would be a disaster. You don't know which composition. All of the right backs, all of the left-footed players might be out because we don't have any of the information.
It is weird, like talking about it in such a complete vacuum. I mean, I hope, obviously, I hope everyone's recovered and everyone's had like mild or asymptomatic cases. And they caught them because they're doing regular testing and everyone's going to be all right. But it's unfortunately we're in this period of time where physiologically we don't know how it impacts people all the time. I mean, there's variants, and it appears to be a lot to do with genetics, and so how the players react to that we don't know. And this new variant is catching people out more regularly. I have a good friend back in the UK, double vaxxed, and he's pretty ill. Has been for 2 weeks. It's not getting better, so that could be the case. There's longer term impacts on some of these players. We hope not. Hope not. So that's Newcastle. Touch wood, something actually happens there. I really hope so. And then the Atletico Madrid in the Champions League. Didn't get a chance to talk about that. That's going to be an interesting matchup because, I mean, Atleti not in a great situation at the moment, shipping a few goals, which has not been the case under Diego Simeone for his decade in charge there. But it's not the same Atleti back four. Although in Jan Oblak, obviously they've got a really world-class goalkeeper, and they've still got dangerous players, even if it's not quite happening for them in La Liga right now.
Yeah, no, it's a tough tie for us. They're not scoring loads of goals as well, but they're sharing the goals around. I always think fun goes out the window and that sounds like a cliche, but when you restart the Champions League, there's round of 16 tie is always like an opportunity for the team to re-galvanise themselves. They can take on a big opponent. And certainly, I mean, we're in a position where again, I'm supposed to be the optimist on this podcast compared to your pessimism, but I feel like I've been negative all the way through. But when you look at the quality in that team, the fact that they've got a lot of quality in there, especially in the front line. I know there's a lot of inconsistency in that front line as well with João Felix and Griezmann, but when they are good, and we have a defence that is quite content to allow an inconsistent attack to shine, which is fairly infuriating. But they've got a lot of good players. You mentioned the defence. We've still got Trippier, who's obviously that's a player who can come back and haunt us. United are a storyline club, aren't they? Do you know those kind of things tend to happen like that? They're not the team that they were. If we can put a professional job together, and hopefully, I'm talking about United of the first 10 days under Rangnick, and it was a bit of a disorganised mess, apart from the first 30 minutes against Palace. So my pessimism is based on that, but there's every reason to believe that in 6 weeks we could be completely different. The way that Tuchel's Chelsea were quite rubbish in the first few weeks, and then they flicked a switch and they were really good. Once they had the benefit of that coaching and they understood the message and they understood the way that they needed to interpret it on the pitch, we could be looking at a very different United by the time that this tie rolls around.
Right, because it's late February and sort of mid-March, the tie. So we have got quite a way to wait for this. Yeah, you're right. I agree. I think we'll see a different United by then. I don't watch them every week, obviously, but I do catch La Liga now and again, and they always feel like a throwback. They'll play 4-4-2 every week. You kind of understand where the tactics are. The trouble has been injuries. I mean, Griezmann and João Felix missed a defeat against Sevilla this weekend. I mean, Suarez is still there doing his thing, but obviously he's not getting any younger. I mean, they've had some trouble in central midfield as well. So, it's not quite the same Atleti as it once was, and you kind of see that in the results. And they're like 15 points behind Real Madrid right now. So they're not in a good place. Might mean they think about the Champions League as the real opportunity. And it is a side, and Simeone's sides are always kind of built like good cup sides. I mean, you'd expect them to be very tight and try not to ship the goals that they have been shipping. The first game, I don't know if it's really an advantage anymore, but the first game is away from home, so United at least will know what they have to do at Old Trafford. I hope, pray that there's fans at Old Trafford.
They haven't won at home this season in Europe, so
right.
If you can, it's the classic thing with United though. The last few years in Europe in the big games, they've been better away from home than they have at Old Trafford, and that's obviously it's a thing that is going to need to change for this, because the one thing strangely about Atletico, they seem to be more adventurous away from home than they used to be. That's the byproduct of like everything he said that's changed there. Simeone hated to have come up against the Simeone team 2 years ago. Now I'm not so bothered by that, but I am fairly concerned about what the home leg might bring, because obviously United have got to be more. You would presume, based on the complexity of the tie, United will probably be more open at home, and that's probably where they're going to thrive a little bit more.
I'm sure United will look to gain some control in central midfield away from home. That's what Rangnick's first thing he identified. This is where United are losing goals because there's not enough control in midfield, and so he's played this sort of narrow four in midfield, and so do Atleti. So it could be very messy in that central midfield. And so anyway, it was interesting. We finally got there because we had PSG out of the hat first time. It was very entertaining, that draw, if ridiculous. Finally got around to a different tie, and the fans that go will enjoy. I've not been to the Wanda. I went to the old ground, Atleti's old ground, which I really enjoyed. It was a really old school ground, bit of a mess of a ground, but tight to the pitch. And so I've not been to the Wanda, but it looks like a fantastic stadium. So I'm sure there'll be a good few thousand Reds over there enjoying that away day.
Yeah, absolutely. I miss the old Spanish stadiums, the ones that just went up and up.
Yes.
But you've got to move on at some point.
I've been to both Camp Nou and Bernabeu a few times. I mean, it's a story, but I once dated a Spanish girl whose father was on the board. So I've been up in the gods in the cheap seats and also in the presidential suite at Bernabeu, and it's kind of a very different experience. Anyway, it should be a good trip. So that's about it. Anything else that we missed this week?
We covered COVID as
Yep.
comprehensively as we could in the absence of actual football. I think we did a good job, considering there was no actual football to talk about. We covered it as well as one podcast could.
Fingers crossed for the Newcastle game, and I can't remember when we're chatting again. Sometime around Christmas or the New Year, I think. I've got a few people who are going to be dropping into the show. I reached out to a few people. My mind was that I can't really ask, put a burden on new people and ask them to do stuff when they've got so much going on. And so I reached out to you and to Dan and a few others and said, hey, do you know anyone? Can you recommend anyone? And you came back and said, yeah, I can recommend someone. Me. Something like that. I'm exaggerating, but I'm glad you did.
No, it's not an exaggeration, Ed. That's I've said it before, but you and Paul, obviously, it was the first podcast that I listened to as a United fan, and I obviously have followed it ever since and loved it. And you were the first kind of people I connected to on Twitter when I joined there as well, and sort of talk to you about that. So, yeah, it's not, when I say at the start that it's an honour to follow Paul and to sort of their big shoes to fill, I absolutely mean it.
Don't talk him up too much. His head he'll be listening to this because he's a lurker. He may have cancelled his social media, but he's on there, no doubt. And his head will be swelling at this point. He had so many nice messages. It's sickening. Sickening, I tell you.
Okay. Well, enjoy your retirement, Paul. I mean them. Even if Ed edits it out, or if it gets edited out by other means, then I still mean it. I was delighted when you asked, because it's just like I said before, I say it to Barney as well about being a part of United culture. Yep. This podcast is part of United culture now, and it's great to be on and hopefully provide sort of a different kind of flavour for listeners. And yeah.
Well, great. Backers, stay tuned. We're going to chat about what's going on in the Premier League, because there are like 3 games this weekend that weren't called off. And everyone else, I will see you on about the 28th, I think, and I'm with Tom Mortimer, who you'll all get to know as well. Wayne, lovely to chat to you, and chat to you soon.
Take care.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.